May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. It is sure good to see you all. We're going to go to the Luke reading. What is it that strikes you right away? Well, there's something that's lacking in the Luke reading. Palms. In Matthew, there are both palms and garments that are thrown down. But in Luke, he has just garments. Now, we thought it'd be easier, instead of having you take off articles of clothing and throw down here, to just have the palms. So that's why that's the way that is. It's an interesting reading for a number of reasons. One is, I pointed out as we started, that Jesus always goes before us into those areas of trial and tribulation, which this certainly was beginning to be for Jesus. This was his last week. He had a price on his head by this time. And going into Jerusalem as he did, and the way he did, certainly it wasn't meant to be under the radar. He very much wanted to be seen, and he made special plans to do that. He had a code worked out to come up with the donkey. Let's look at a couple of points. The first being Bethphage and Bethany. What do you know about those two cities? Pardon?
They both start when you watch them. See that?
Sweetheart? Well, that's true. That is true. Bethany is the home of Lazarus, Mary and Martha. It's the home of Simon the leper. It is on the east side of Jerusalem, and it's close to the city of Bethphage, which is the seat of, it was a walled city at the time, and a lot of the Sadducees lived there. It was kind of the second setting of the Sanhedrin. When Jesus was brought to trial, he was brought to trial in the temple, but he's also brought to trial in this walled city of Bethphage. Lots of the priestly class lived in that suburb. It is also near the Mount of Olives, and is also near Gethsemane. Jesus couldn't have picked a more difficult place to enter. He was coming from Jericho, about 17 miles away, so he's made his way to Jerusalem. There's a price on his head. And he goes to Bethphage, and he sends two disciples to untie a colt. Matthew has the colt and the donkey being untied together, and Jesus riding both. It must have been kind of a lumpy ride. Manage where you put the comma. Who has, is it Zephaniah 9:9? What are some of the scriptural passages that Matthew and Luke has fulfilled in this particular passage? Oh, I'll wait around. Well, I asked that because I forgot. Anybody have, is it Zephaniah 9:9? Who has that? Who can look that up? Zephaniah is one of the minor prophets. It's in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament. Anybody have it? Who has it? Barbara.
9:9.
I think that's right.
There's only 3 chapters in Zephaniah.
Then I'm way off. Maybe it's Zechariah I'm looking for. That's what I get for trying to do this without looking at my notes thoroughly. Don't let this happen to you, folks, when you get up here and...
Oh, it's right before Zechariah.
Does anybody have it? Barbara?
Okay.
It was the wrong Z, wasn't it? Yeah.
9:9. All right.
Yes.
Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he. Humble and riding on an ass, on a colt, the foal of an ass.
That is beautiful. It is beautiful. I'm glad we got that right. Although I was kind of worried there for a minute. I misremembered again. Okay, so there's the scripture that is being fulfilled. Now, he's coming on a donkey. Why? Why not a horse? Why not a war horse? It's too bold, and the donkey signifies royalty. Donkeys have a better reputation outside of the U.S., I guess. But donkey, we saw Balaam riding on one, and Boaz riding on one, and David rode on one when he came into Jerusalem, the holy city. It is if you're going to war, the king would ride the horse, but if you're coming in peace, he would ride the donkey. So that is very significant. Jesus comes in peace, and he's riding the donkey. He wants his disciples to understand that. He's coming. Yeah, he's setting up the lower story. He's got a place in the upper story, obviously, but trying to find his place in the lower story, there's that. Again, he struggles with that right up to the end, asking why can't this cup pass from me? But he understands he has a great role to play, a central role to play. He has Pharisees. What are Pharisees? Pardon?
Leaders.
Well, kind of. Pharisees they came about a couple centuries before Christ, and then after Christ they kind of fade away. The Jews had kind of gotten away from the study of the law, and the Pharisees were the ones, kind of laity, who got the people back into the Torah. Said, you really have to study the law. That's important. You got to have the law. And Jesus is always poking fun at them because it's like, well, you've got the law and the prophets, but what about mercy? What about forgiveness? And Jesus is holding up that side in opposition to the Pharisees who are holding up the legal side. And there are some Pharisees that are friends of Jesus, of course. They warn him when Herod is out to get him. They warn Jesus. Some of the Pharisees, Nicodemus. And the most famous Pharisee of all, Paul, wrote a lot of the New Testament. Jesus was probably more connected with the Pharisees, and the rabbis came out of the Pharisees. So he's got the Pharisees. They could go with Jesus just kind of so far. So we have Jesus coming, the authors anyway, stating that Jesus came right through the center of the people that make up the Sanhedrin. He's coming into the city on a donkey to signify he comes in peace. And who is it that does all the shouting?
The disciples.
Well, the disciples, yes. Not the crowds. It's the disciples, the faithful ones. These are not the ones that are just curious and kind of come around because it's a big show, it's a big party. Hey, there's a parade, there's a guy riding a donkey. Let's go see what's going on. They got to be selling waffles on a stick as they do this. So a lot of the crowd goes and wants to hear this stuff, but when it gets tough, and when the leadership wants to go through and start the rumors, it's the crowd that turns against Jesus. And some of the disciples do too there for a while. But the disciples, these are the faithful ones. These are the followers that they're focused on. So we've got them coming into Jerusalem. And what do the Pharisees tell them? Get a handle on these guys. Why? Because they were proclaiming, the Pharisees knew Jesus was going to be the Messiah. The Messiah was coming. They believe in the resurrection. They believe in angels, things that the Sadducees don't believe in, resurrection angels and that kind of thing. The Pharisees believe that, and they're pushing that. But when they started proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah, Son of God, that's where they fell out. So you got to keep these guys quiet. There's a price on his head anyway. They're after him. So please, keep quiet. I think it's more of a warning again that you gotta tone this down a bit. And what was Jesus' response?
Good luck.
Yeah, even these rocks are going to sing out. Now that's kind of a weird thing to say. And I love it. The weirder the better. Joshua 24:27. See, he said to all the people, the stone will be a witness against us. It has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God. That's Joshua 24:7. So Joshua set up a stone like an Ebenezer. That's what that is. It's an Ebenezer stone. But the stone heard and bears testimony to all the words that were spoken of the covenant with Joshua and the people. 1 Peter 2. And coming to him as a living stone, which had been rejected by men, but is choice and precious in the sight of God. You also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house for a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For this is contained in Scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a choice stone, a precious cornerstone, and he who believes in me will not be disappointed. Habakkuk. Now there's a prophet. Habakkuk 2:9 says, Woe to him who builds his house by unjust gain, setting his nest on high, to escape the clutches of ruin. You have plotted the ruin of many people, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. Job, ask the animals, and they will teach you, or the birds of the air, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, or let the fish of the sea inform you. Which of these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every creature, and the breath of all mankind. Everything belongs to God. Everything is the incarnate witness of God. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. That's Psalm 19, 1 through 4. And Paul writes in Romans, Ever since the creation of the world, his eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood as seen through the things he has made. So they are without excuse. Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voices go out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is a bridegroom coming out of his chamber like a champion, rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. So how do you view creation, the created world, in light of, now it's not just poetry, I mean it's beautiful, the words that are written, but how do you view creation in that not only the statement of Jesus about the stones will sing out, understood metaphorically, but also understood that all creation points to God and is evidence of God's handiwork. How do you view your pets? How do you view your work? How do you view the world around you? How do you view the environment? If it all speaks to God. You know, it's very cryptic what Jesus said, but there's a lot of truth in that. Does science support that? Sometimes. If you get right down to it, what they're looking for is that unified theory of everything, chaos or quantum mechanics, and what is at core is a relationship. It is mysterious. Right at the essence of all of it, it's mysterious. And some scientists are coming to the conclusion that that is where God operates, is at that level of creation where the outcome is not really known, but known to God, and that future is held. Oh, I can smell the wood burning now. Well, this is just supposed to be about palms and about some nice little story. But it's about you as a disciple of Jesus Christ. If the dirt and the stones and the rivers and the mountains, the hills, the stars, all point to the glory of God, what about you? Where are you in this story? Are you speaking as a disciple of Jesus Christ to the glory of God? Are you a witness of God's handiwork? Not only tending to creation, but tending to your own witness, or being a witness. It's fascinating the way everything works together. I was reading Newsweek. Well, it's on the internet, so it's got to be true. Like Abraham Lincoln said, don't believe everything you read on the internet. And the article is Science Finds God. It's by Sharon Begley. It says, the achievements of modern science seem to contradict religion and undermine faith. But for a growing number of scientists, the same discoveries offer support for spirituality and hints of the very nature of God. The more deeply scientists see into the secrets of the universe, you'd expect the more God would fade away from their hearts and minds. This goes back to Darwin. That you can posit a system that works and you don't need God involved in it. But even the Big Bang now has to have something to get things going. I guess it just fell off the table or whatever, just entropically just flashed up all of a sudden. Magic. That's the area where God works. But that's not how it went for a guy named Alan Sandage, now slightly stooped and white-haired at 72. I don't know why they pick on people that are white-haired or 72. Sandage has spent a professional lifetime coaxing secrets out of the stars, peering through telescopes from Chile to California, in the hopes of spying nothing less than the origins and destiny of the universe. That's like the Hubble. As much as any other 20th century astronomer, Sandage actually figured it out. His observations of distant stars showed us how fast the universe is expanding and how old it is, about 15 billion years or so. The Earth about 3.5 billion. But through it all, Sandage, who says he was almost a practicing atheist as a boy, was nagged by mysteries whose answers were not to be found in the glittering panoply of supernovas. Among them, here's his question: why is there something rather than nothing? These weirdest things keep these people awake at night. Why is there something rather than nothing? And I'm glad he struggled with this. Sandage began to despair of answering such questions, the reason alone. The reason alone, he couldn't get there. And so at 50, he willed himself to accept God. As a scientist would, right? We're not going to deal with anything other than you can't see, taste, touch, feel, whatever it is. But for him, that was the only thing that could answer the question. Why is there something rather than nothing? God is the only thing out there that creates ex nihilo out of nothing. It was my science that drove me to the conclusion that the world is much more complicated than can be explained by science, he says. It is only through the supernatural that I can understand the mystery of existence. Something surprising is happening between these two old war horses, science and religion. And you probably know anecdotally other scientists that, maybe Crick or Watson, some of these others, that came to God only through their scientific inquiry. Jesus stated a truth. The rocks, stones themselves will sing praises to God. Will do so even if the disciples are silent. I think preferably the disciples, you and I, should not be silent. We should be speaking the truth of God and what we know of God. And be a witness. And be a witness. So Jesus struggles with his place in the upper and lower story. Yet he knows his place, and he moves forward confidently, deliberately. Plan to move from Bethany, Bethphage, through the seat of the city of priests, through the enemy, basically, and down into Jerusalem, fulfilling prophecy very much in their minds. Where are you in this? Where are you in this story? Do you know your place in the story? We operate in the lower story. Do you know your place? What are you bringing forward? What do you testify to? He came to Jerusalem, the killer of the prophets and the home of kings. He came through Bethany, the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, and the seat of the Sanhedrin. He showed incredible courage. His price was on his head in a desire to make a statement by fulfilling prophecy. He rode on the royal and noble donkey, a sign that he was a king, but not a king understood as a conquering hero, but a hero in another way. A hero in another story, our story. He spoke for the poor and the maligned. He put his life into God's hands and trusted God with the outcome. He states the truth to his Pharisaic friends who think he went too far in allowing himself to be declared Son of God. The created order, as represented by the shouting stones, speaks of God's incarnation in all of creation, from the beginning until the very end. So where are you? And don't say, I'm sitting here at Hickory Knoll. Where are you? Are you some of the merely curious? And are you willing to turn against Christ when it's no longer convenient? When you're challenged? Do you proclaim his divinity and thus state your willingness to follow him wherever he may lead you, understanding that he does go before you into those areas? Or do you think he's asking too much of you and you hit the mute button? Do you allow Christ to lead you into new life through the death of your old way of being? Death to new life. Are you willing to put your faith in the hands, or shake the hand of the Christ who wants to very much lead you into a new way of being in the world? Creation bears witness of the Christ. Disciples proclaim that Jesus is Messiah and Savior. What about you? What about you? Amen.